When she said she wrote to clear her mind, I believed her. Every night I'd hear the scratch of her pen, the quiet sighs. I didn't know she was writing love letters to someone who wasn't me. It became a kind of rhythm in our house. The soft rustle of pages turning, the faint smell of her favorite ink, and that slow, deliberate breathing she did when she was lost in thought. I used to find it comforting. After dinner, she would pour a glass of wine, tuck her hair behind her ear, and start writing. I would watch her from the couch sometimes, the glow of the lamp tracing the outline of her shoulder. She looked peaceful. Like nothing in the world could reach her, except whatever was bleeding onto that page. I loved that about her. The stillness, the focus, the mystery of what went through her head. I never thought I had to know everything she was thinking. Love, to me, meant trust, so I trusted her completely. I told myself that her privacy was sacred. I never asked what she wrote about, never peeked, never doubted. I thought that was what a good husband did. But now I know there's a kind of silence that doesn't protect love. It kills it slowly. The first time I noticed her journal, it was a small leather notebook, brown with a golden strap that wrapped around it twice. It looked old, like something she'd owned for years, though I never saw it before. She carried it everywhere, in her bag, to the kitchen, even to the bathroom. I teased her once about it, saying she guarded it like a state secret. She just smiled and said, "It's the only place I can be honest." I laughed. I thought it was poetic. I didn't realize she meant it literally. There's this one memory that keeps replaying in my head. The night of our anniversary. We went out to dinner, one of those quiet places where the music feels like a heartbeat under the lights. She looked beautiful, distracted, but beautiful. When I asked what she was thinking, she said, "Just something I want to write later." It didn't bother me then. In fact, I loved that I was part of her inspiration. I told myself that her love for writing was another way she loved me, that every word was a piece of our story. But sometimes, love blinds you to the obvious. Weeks passed. Her writing sessions grew longer, later. I'd go to bed alone, and when I woke in the middle of the night, she'd still be there, hunched over her desk, candle burning low, her face half hidden by her hair. The way she'd close the notebook so quickly if I entered the room, I remember thinking it was sweet, like she was hiding a surprise for me. I even imagined she was writing a book about us, maybe a romantic story, something to give me on my birthday. You see, the cruel thing about betrayal isn't the act itself. It's the months you spend loving someone who's already left you in their heart. It was around that time that she started acting differently. Nothing big, just little shifts. She became more distant, less affectionate, but oddly more gentle. She'd touch my face when she thought I was asleep. Sometimes she'd whisper something under her breath, words I couldn't catch. I thought maybe she was going through something, maybe stress, maybe depression. I wanted to help, but every time I asked, she said, "I'm fine, just tired," and I believed her again. Love makes fools out of us all. One night, I came home later than usual. The house was dark except for her lamp. She was asleep on the couch, her journal open beside her. I froze. It was right there, the one thing she'd never let me touch. I told myself to look away, to respect her boundaries, but my eyes betrayed me before I could even think. The first line I saw was written in her delicate, slanted handwriting. "He kissed me today," and for a moment, I forgot who I was supposed to be. At first, I didn't even process it. My brain refused to connect the words. He kissed me. Who was he? Maybe it was fiction, I told myself. Maybe she was writing a story. She always had that creative streak. It could be anything. I repeated that thought over and over, like a prayer. I even smiled, closed the journal, and covered her with a blanket. I kissed her forehead and told myself everything was fine. But I didn't sleep that night. The sentence replayed in my head like a siren. He kissed me today. I wanted to believe it was nothing, but a part of me knew. There was a heaviness in her eyes lately, a glow that wasn't mine. The truth had already been written. I just hadn't turned the page yet. The next morning, I watched her make coffee. She hummed softly, her hair still messy from sleep, her voice light. It felt like any other morning, except I couldn't look at her the same way. Every gesture, every word, every smile, I questioned all of it. I remember thinking, how long has this been happening? Who is he? Does he know I exist? I told myself I'd never open that journal again. I made a promise, a weak one, that I would let it go. But curiosity is a quiet animal. It waits. It grows. For the next few days, I couldn't focus on anything else. The journal became an obsession. I'd catch myself staring at it when she left it on the table. It felt alive, like it was watching me, daring me to open it again. The way she kept touching it, checking it, protecting it, that was the final push. One evening, she said she was going out with friends. She kissed my cheek and told me not to wait up. Her perfume lingered in the air long after she left, sweet and heavy like guilt. I sat there for an hour, staring at that brown leather notebook sitting on her desk. The strap was slightly loose, like it wanted me to open it. The room felt too quiet, my chest felt too tight. And then, I did it. I untied the strap. The leather sighed as it opened, like it had been waiting for this moment too. Her handwriting filled every page, neat and intimate. The first few entries were harmless, thoughts about her day, reflections, little quotes about life. I almost laughed in relief. But then the tone changed. The writing became softer, more emotional. Words like touch, need, and can't stop thinking about him began to appear. And then I saw it again. His name. It was written like a secret, tucked inside the middle of a sentence, but I saw it. I recognized it. And in that moment, everything inside me broke. Everything inside me broke. It wasn't the kind of pain that makes you cry. It was colder than that. It felt like a slow, silent cracking inside my chest, like glass under pressure. I stared at that name. 5 letters, and the world around me went quiet. My breathing, my heartbeat, even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to vanish. All I could hear was the echo of her voice in my head, laughing, whispering, saying she loved me. The name was someone I knew. It wasn't a stranger, not some mysterious man she met in secret. It was Mark, my best friend, the man who was my best man at our wedding, the man I'd known since college, the man I trusted with my life. The entry said, "Mark looked at me today like he knew everything I was too afraid to say." I read it over and over, waiting for it to change, waiting for the ink to rearrange itself into something harmless. But it didn't. The sentence stayed the same, and so did the weight in my stomach. I turned the page, my hand shaking, my pulse pounding so hard I thought it might tear through my skin. She had written about the first time he touched her hand, how her heart stopped for a second, how she told herself it was innocent. She said she tried to ignore it, that she went home and felt guilty for smiling. But the next entry said, "He makes me feel like I used to before everything became routine." That word, routine, cut me open. Routine was what she called our life. The dinners, the shared mornings, the inside jokes, the quiet nights. Everything that made us IS was now just routine. I kept reading even though I didn't want to. Each page was another dagger. She wrote about how she tried to resist him, how she couldn't sleep thinking about him, how she dreamed about running away. She wrote that she didn't hate me, that she was just tired of feeling invisible. Invisible. That's the word that shattered me the most. I never saw myself that way. I thought I was a good husband. I cooked when she was tired, I listened when she needed to talk, I held her when she cried. But somewhere along the line, I guess I became a background noise in her story. I was there, but not really seen. And Mark, he must have noticed the cracks before I did. I slammed the journal shut, almost afraid she would walk in and catch me. My hands were trembling. My chest was burning. I didn't even know what emotion was stronger, anger or grief. I wanted to throw the journal out the window, but I couldn't. It was like holding evidence of a crime that hadn't finished yet. I tied the strap back neatly, placed it exactly where it was, and sat in the dark. When she came home, I pretended to be asleep. I heard her keys hit the counter, the soft click of her shoes being taken off, the quiet hum she made when she was in a good mood. I knew that hum. She only did it when she felt light, when something made her happy. It used to be me, now it wasn't. She came into the bedroom, kissed my cheek, whispered, "I love you," and turned off the light. Her skin smelled different that night. I lay there next to her, my eyes open, my heart somewhere far away. I wanted to ask where she'd been. I wanted to grab her and demand the truth, but instead, I listened to her breathing, slow, calm, peaceful, like nothing was wrong. The next morning, she made coffee and asked how I slept. I said, "Fine." She smiled, and I smiled back. That was the start of the longest week of my life. Every conversation was a performance. Every laugh, every touch, every "I love you" was a scene from a play we were both pretending to enjoy. She didn't know I'd read her secret, and I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. I tried to avoid Mark, but he called me 3 days later. Said he wanted to grab a drink, catch up. My stomach turned. I almost said no, but part of me wanted to see him, to look at his face and search for guilt. So I agreed. We met at our usual bar. He was the same as always, loud, friendly, full of stories. When he saw me, he hugged me like nothing had changed. I could feel his heart beating, steady and confident. I hated that. I hated how normal he looked. He talked about work, about his new apartment, about the same boring things. But when he mentioned her name, just casually, "How's Sarah doing?" I swear I saw it. A flicker. A small, nervous twitch in his jaw. It lasted less than a second, but I caught it. The guilt. the shadow behind his eyes. "She's fine," I said, watching him carefully. He nodded. "You two always were solid. I envy that." I smiled. My throat tightened. "Yeah, solid." For the rest of the night, I barely heard a word he said. I watched his hands, his gestures, his eyes. Every movement felt like proof. Every laugh felt like a lie. By the time we said goodbye, my mind was already spinning with questions. How long had it been going on? Was it still happening? Did they meet while I was at work? Or worse, while I slept in the next room? That night, she was quiet. I asked if she had written anything new, pretending to sound casual. She looked at me, then down at the floor and said, "No, not tonight." I could tell she was lying. The pen was still on her desk. The notebook was gone. Days passed. My mind turned into a loop. The pages, the sentences, the name. I started seeing signs everywhere. The way her phone lit up and she'd quickly turn it over. The way she smiled at messages she didn't show me. The way she suddenly wore perfume again, the kind she hadn't used since we were dating. I was unraveling, but quietly, carefully. I needed to know more before I confronted her. I told myself I'd wait, but patience was turning into poison. One evening, I decided to look again. She was in the shower, the sound of water masking everything. I went into her desk drawer. The journal wasn't there. My pulse spiked. I searched her bags, her closet, nothing. Then I saw it, on the windowsill beside the plants, half hidden behind a photo frame. The golden strap caught the light. I opened it faster this time, my restraint gone. The first line on the new page read, "He says he's scared, but I know he won't end it. He loves me, even if he can't admit it." I froze. He says he's scared. She was writing about Mark, but the words, they sounded like something she'd heard. Not imagined. It meant they had talked. Recently. My hands began to shake again, but this time with anger. I turned the page. Another entry. He said it's wrong. I said it doesn't feel wrong. I said it feels like the only truth left. That was it. The only truth left. That line played in my head for hours, like a curse. She came out of the shower while I was still sitting there, the journal open in my hands. She froze in the doorway. The towel slipped slightly from her shoulder. The air between us turned heavy. There was no pretending anymore. "You read it," she said quietly. Her voice wasn't angry. It was tired, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Yes," I said. My voice barely came out. "I read it." She nodded slowly, stepped closer, and looked at me. Really looked. For the first time in months, her eyes met mine, but they didn't hold fear. They held relief. "Then I guess you finally know," she whispered. And I did. I just didn't know what to do with it. And I did. I just didn't know what to do with it. She stood there dripping from the shower, hair clinging to her shoulders, skin flushed from the heat. I remember thinking she looked almost unreal in that moment, like someone I once knew but couldn't recognize anymore. The towel hung loose around her, and she didn't move to fix it. She just looked at me, eyes soft, calm, almost sad. I was shaking, the journal still open in my hands, her words staring at the both of us like an exposed wound. "How long?" I asked. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then, finally, "Does it matter?" It was the worst possible answer. Because yes, it did. It mattered more than anything. I needed to know when she stopped being mine, when he became the one she wrote about, when our life turned into fiction. "I need to know," I said. My voice cracked. "How long?" She walked past me, grabbed a shirt from the chair, slipped it on without looking at me. "You don't want to know." I wouldn't ask if I didn't. Silence. Only the sound of her breath, steady and tired. "About a year," she said finally. The words hit like a physical blow. A year. 12 months of lies. Birthdays, anniversaries, dinners, small moments, all of it layered with deceit. I tried to do the math in my head, tried to remember what we were doing a year ago. The trips, the laughter, the late-night movies. All while she was already writing about him. She sat on the bed, her hands clasped together. "I didn't mean for it to happen." I laughed. A low, bitter sound that didn't feel like mine. "You didn't mean to fall into his arms? You didn't mean to write him love letters while I was asleep beside you?" Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. "It wasn't like that," she said softly. "You stopped seeing me long before I stopped loving you." That line. It should have made me angry. Instead, it confused me. Because a part of me knew it wasn't entirely untrue. We had drifted. Work, stress, comfort, they'd all replaced the excitement we once had. But that didn't justify what she'd done. Love doesn't disappear because it gets quiet. "You could have told me," I said. "You could have said something." "I tried," she whispered. You were always so sure of us. You never wanted to see what was missing." I turned away. I couldn't look at her anymore. The room felt too small, the air too heavy. My reflection in the windows like a stranger, pale, tired, broken. "Was it him the whole time?" I asked. "Mark?" She didn't answer. Her silence was confirmation enough. I walked to the dresser, picked up the photo of the three of us at the lake. She was in the middle, laughing. Mark had his arm around both of us. We looked like family. I remembered the day so clearly. The sunlight, the sound of the water, the feeling of peace. And now, that memory was tainted forever. "You wrote that he makes you feel alive," I said, holding up the journal. "Did you ever stop to think what this would do to me?" Her tears spilled over, but I didn't stop. "You said you felt invisible. Do you know what I feel now? I feel erased." She covered her face with her hands and started to sob. I wanted to hate her, but watching her crumble like that made something twist in me. Pity, love, I couldn't even tell anymore. I sat down on the edge of the bed, far enough not to touch her. "Did he love you?" I asked. She hesitated. "He said he did." "And you?" Her voice broke. "I don't know." That answer hurt more than if she had said yes. It meant everything between us had died for something uncertain, something not even real. For a while, neither of us spoke. The sound of the rain outside filled the silence. It was one of those slow rains that make the world feel suspended, caught between moments. Finally, she said, "I ended it." "When?" "A few weeks ago." "Before or after I started noticing you couldn't look me in the eyes?" She closed her eyes. "Before." "It didn't make me feel better. It didn't make any of it easier. The damage was done. You can't unwrite betrayal. It stains everything that comes after it." She stood up, walked to the window, and stared into the rain. "I never meant to hurt you," she said quietly. I wanted to believe that, but the words rang hollow. She had written things that could never be taken back. Words are permanent that way. Once they're written, they live forever, even after the love dies. That night, she slept in the guest room. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the storm outside. Every thunderclap felt like her pen scratching another confession into the page. I couldn't stop seeing his name in my head, over and over, like it was carved into the walls of my mind. The next morning, she was gone before I woke. A note on the counter said she needed space. The journal was gone too. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at that note, feeling the hollow quiet of the house pressing against me. I poured coffee, but it tasted like ash. Every corner of the house held memories of her, the chair she loved, the scent of her perfume, the soft hum she made while cooking. Now it all felt like evidence of a life that wasn't real. Mark texted me that day. "Hey man, you good? Haven't heard from you." I stared at the message, fingers hovering over the screen. I wanted to send him everything. The pages, the words, her confession. I wanted to destroy his life like they'd destroyed mine. But I didn't. I just typed, "I'm fine," and hit send. It was easier to lie than to explain. Days turned into weeks. She didn't come home. I didn't call. I kept expecting her to show up, to say she was sorry, to ask for forgiveness. But she didn't. Instead, I kept replaying every moment of our marriage, searching for signs I had missed. Every laugh, every touch, every look now seemed scripted, rehearsed. I started to wonder if I had ever really known her at all. One night, I found something while cleaning the bedroom. A small piece of paper, folded and tucked under the lamp. I almost threw it away, but something made me unfold it. It was her handwriting. It said, "I didn't fall out of love with you. I just fell into a story I couldn't control." I sat on the floor holding that note, trying to understand it. Was she apologizing, explaining, justifying? I didn't know. All I knew was that I missed her, even after everything. I hated her, but I missed her. Love is cruel that way. It doesn't die cleanly. It lingers in the cracks, in the quiet moments, in the ache that comes when you wake up alone. I started going through her things, not out of spite, but out of need. I found a few of her old journals, ones from before we were married. I thought maybe I could find the woman I fell in love with somewhere in those pages. But all I found were fragments. Dreams, fears, hopes. Pieces of someone who used to exist. I realized that she hadn't just betrayed me. She had lost herself too. A few days later, she came back. I heard the front door open, soft footsteps in the hallway. I didn't move. She stood in the doorway, her eyes swollen, her face pale. She looked smaller somehow, fragile. "I came for my things," she said. I nodded. "They're in the closet." She hesitated, then stepped closer. "I'm sorry." "I know." She looked down. "I didn't expect you to forgive me." I don't, I said, but I still needed to hear you say it. She nodded again, wiped her tears, and started packing. I watched her move around the room, touching objects that used to belong to both of us. The silence between us was heavy, filled with everything we would never say again. Before she left, she turned to me one last time. I didn't mean for you to find the journal. I know, I said quietly, but I'm glad I did. Why? Because now I know who you really were. She looked at me for a long time, her mouth trembling like she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Then she left. The door closed, and I realized that was the last sound of our marriage. The door closed, and I realized that was the last sound of our marriage. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no tears, no slamming of doors. Just that soft click, final and hollow. I stood there for a long time staring at the handle, half expecting it to turn again. It didn't. The house exhaled, like it had been holding its breath for months. Everything was still. Too still. I walked through the rooms one by one. Her scent lingered everywhere. Lavender and ink. It was on the pillows, the curtains, the blanket folded at the edge of the couch. It was like she hadn't left at all, just dissolved into the air. I sat down in the chair where she used to write. The space felt smaller without her in it, as if her presence had stretched the walls and now they were caving in. On the desk, there was a faint circle where her coffee mug had always been. Little ink stains near the lamp, tiny ghosts of her nightly ritual. I ran my fingers across the marks, and it hit me. For months I'd watched her write, not realizing she was documenting the end of us. Every page she filled had been another nail in the coffin I helped build through silence. The journal was gone, but its memory haunted me. I started to imagine new entries, what she might be writing now, where she might be writing them, and whether his name still filled the margins. It became an obsession. My days blurred. Work meant nothing. Sleep barely came. I'd wake in the middle of the night, reaching for someone who wasn't there. I told my family she had gone to stay with her sister. I told my friends we were taking time apart. I lied because the truth sounded pathetic. Saying my wife fell in love with my best friend made me feel small, weak, pitiful. And the worst part was knowing people would pity me. I didn't want their sympathy. I wanted my old life back, the version of us that existed before the lies. A week passed before I saw Mark again. I hadn't planned to. It was a coincidence, or maybe fate's cruel sense of humor. I went to the grocery store late one evening, trying to avoid running into anyone I knew, and there he was, standing by the produce section, laughing with someone on the phone. When he saw me, his face froze. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he hung up and forced a smile. "Hey," he said. "Been a while." I nodded, my jaw tight. "Yeah." He looked older somehow, or maybe guilt just aged him faster. He scratched the back of his neck. "How's Sarah?" The sound of her name from his mouth made my skin crawl. "Gone," I said flatly. His expression shifted. "Gone? What do you mean?" She laughed. He swallowed hard. "Because of me?" I stared at him. He couldn't even say it out loud. He wanted me to confirm it, to share the guilt so it wouldn't drown him alone. "You really want me to answer that?" I asked. He looked away. It wasn't supposed to happen. I laughed, bitter and sharp. "You two should write a book together. You both love that line." "Look, man," he said, lowering his voice. "It was a mistake. We were both hurting. You two were—" "Don't," I said, cutting him off. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." He stopped, his eyes flicking to the floor. Around us, people pushed carts, picking apples, weighing oranges, the ordinary world moving on while mine sat frozen in betrayal. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to break his nose and watch him bleed like I'd been bleeding for weeks. But violence wouldn't fix it. It wouldn't make her come back. It wouldn't erase the pages. "She's gone, Mark," I said quietly. "You can stop pretending this is about guilt. It's over." He nodded, but his eyes stayed distant, as if he wanted to say something else. I turned and walked away before he could. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel the weight of his stare burning through me all the way to the exit. That night, I went home and sat on the floor of our bedroom, surrounded by everything she'd left behind. Old clothes, books, little things that didn't matter until they were all I had left. Her handwriting on a post-it, her half-used perfume, a photo strip from a fair years ago where we looked so happy it felt like a lie. I opened a bottle of whiskey, drank straight from it, and stared at those pictures. The faces smiling back at me were ghosts. I wondered if she'd ever look at our memories and feel the same ache, or if she'd already replaced them with someone else's. At some point, I started writing. Not in her journals, in mine. Cheap lined paper, blue pen. I didn't even know why. Maybe to fight the urge to read her words again. maybe to drown them out. My first entry was just one sentence. She lied beautifully. I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote more. Paragraphs, pages. I poured everything out. Anger, sadness, confusion. For the first time, I understood what she meant when she said writing made her honest. It was the only way to survive the noise inside my head. Days blurred into nights. The seasons started to shift. Summer slipped into autumn, and with it, something inside me began to quiet down. The rage didn't vanish. It just turned into exhaustion. I stopped checking my phone, stopped waiting for her name to appear. I told myself I didn't care anymore. But every time I passed a bookstore window, every time I saw a woman writing in a cafe, my chest tightened. Then one morning, there was a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name in her handwriting. I stared at it for 10 minutes before opening it. My hands were shaking the whole time. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The same brown ink she used for her journal. The same slanted writing I'd memorized. It said, "I know you hate me. You have every right to. I just want you to know I didn't choose him over you. I chose the version of myself I could only find when I wasn't pretending to be perfect for you. Maybe that's selfish. Maybe it's cruel. But it's the truth. I hope someday you'll understand. No apology, no explanation, just that. The truth." I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and burned it in the sink. The flame was small, quiet, almost respectful. I watched it turn her words to ash and thought about how something so light could still feel so heavy. After that, I stopped writing for a while. I stopped everything. I let the silence grow until it felt like a second skin. But grief doesn't disappear. It mutates. It turns into habits. Checking old photos, replaying conversations, wondering what she's doing now. And then one night, weeks later, I saw her again. It was by accident. I had gone out with a coworker for dinner. As we left the restaurant, I saw her across the street. She was with someone, not Mark, a different man. She looked happy, effortlessly happy, the kind of happy you don't fake. She was laughing, holding his arm, her head tilted back like she used to when she was with me. She didn't see me, and I didn't call out. I just watched for a moment, my heart strangely calm. There was no explosion, no pain, just acceptance, or maybe emptiness pretending to be peace. I turned away, walked to my car, and didn't look back. That night, I opened my journal again. I wrote, "She found her next story. I'm still living in the last chapter." And for the first time, that sentence didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. And for the first time, that sentence didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. It sat there on the page, clean and quiet, like the last line of a chapter I didn't realize I was ready to close. I looked at it for a long time, waiting for the ache to rise again, but it didn't. Maybe pain has an expiration date, or maybe I'd finally exhausted every way it could hurt me. Either way, I felt still. Not happy, not healed, just still. In the following weeks, the silence in the house started to sound different. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was just space, empty, but livable. I cleaned out the closet, folded her clothes, and packed them into boxes. I found strands of her hair in the sheets, tiny pieces of her perfume still clinging to the fabric, the little things you never notice until they're the only things left. Each time I threw something away, I whispered goodbye under my breath, like a ritual only I understood. Mark tried to reach out once more. A text. Just 3 words. "I'm so sorry." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Forgiveness isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just choosing not to answer. I deleted his number, erased our photos, and let that part of my life fade into the static of memory. My world got smaller after that. Work, coffee, sleep. The days folded into each other like identical sheets of paper. But every night, I wrote. Not about her, not anymore. About the silence that came after her. About learning how to be alone without feeling empty. About rediscovering the sound of my own thoughts when they weren't echoing against hers. One night, I went for a walk. It was cold, the kind of cold that bites through your jacket and makes every breath visible. The streets were quiet, the city half asleep. I passed by the bookstore where she used to spend hours browsing. The lights were still on inside, golden and soft. Through the window, I saw a young couple sitting on the floor between the aisles, reading poetry to each other. I watched them for a moment, smiling at their innocence, their unbroken faith in love. I didn't envy them. I just felt older. When I got home, I poured a glass of whiskey and sat by the window. I opened my journal and started to write again. Pain doesn't disappear when love ends, I wrote. It just changes shape. It becomes the shadow that walks beside you, quieter every day, until one morning you wake up and realize it's gone. I paused, staring at the words. I wasn't sure if they were true yet, but I wanted them to be. Weeks turned into months. Winter melted into spring. The city began to bloom again, and so did parts of me I thought were dead. I started going out more, lunches with coworkers, small weekend trips, simple things. I met people, laughed again, even flirted once or twice. None of it felt forced. I wasn't searching for anyone new. I was just learning how to exist without the weight of the past. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, I got a message from an unknown number. It was her. It read, "I heard you're doing okay. I'm glad." I stared at it for a long time, the familiar curve of her words cutting through me like the echo of a song I used to love. My first instinct was to delete it, but instead I typed, "I am. I hope you are too." Then I turned off my phone and sat there in the fading light, listening to the city breathe. A few minutes later, another message came through. I didn't open it right away. When I finally did, it was short. I kept the journal. I couldn't throw it away. Maybe one day you'll understand why. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I just closed my eyes and let the silence answer for me. That night, I dreamt of her. Not the way she was in the end, distant, secretive, fragile, but how she was before it all began. Laughing, barefoot in the kitchen, sunlight spilling across her face. In the dream, she wasn't writing. She was looking at me, smiling, saying my name softly like it still meant something. I woke up with tears on my pillow, but they weren't the same kind as before. They were lighter. They belonged to acceptance. The next morning, I went to the park where we used to walk. I took my journal with me. It had grown thick over the months, pages full of pain, reflection, fragments of forgiveness. I sat on a bench under a tree and started reading from the beginning. The first few entries were raw and angry. But as I turned the pages, the tone changed. The anger softened into sadness, the sadness into clarity. By the time I reached the last page, I barely recognized the man who wrote those early words. I flipped to a blank page and wrote one final entry. I used to think she ruined me. Now I realize she revealed me. The parts of me that could break, the parts that could survive, and the parts that could love again even after everything burned. I tore the page out, folded it, and tucked it inside the hollow of the tree where we once carved our initials years ago. It felt right, like returning something that never belonged entirely to me. As I stood up to leave, a gust of wind passed through the park, scattering petals across the ground. For a moment, it felt like the world was exhaling with me. I didn't look back. That night, I didn't write. I didn't need to. I sat by the window, sipping tea instead of whiskey, watching the city lights flicker. The pain that used to fill the room was gone, replaced by a quiet calm that felt almost holy. Maybe that's what healing really is. Not forgetting, not forgiving, but making peace with the ghost that lingers, learning to let it sit beside you until it fades on its own. The next morning, I woke early. The sunlight crept across the floor, bright and gentle. For the first time in a long while, I didn't reach for the past. I didn't think about what she was doing, or where Mark might be, or what might have been. I just existed. Present. Breathing. And as I poured my coffee, I realized something. She had her journal. I had mine. Hers was filled with love she couldn't confess. Mine was filled with truths I couldn't escape. Maybe that was the difference between us. She wrote to run away from her life. I wrote to find mine again. And in a strange way, that realization felt like closure. It's strange how quiet the house feels now, but it's not an empty quiet anymore. It's the kind that hums softly, like a memory you've learned to live with. Months have passed since I last saw her, and yet she's still everywhere. Not as a wound, but as a shadow that moves when the light changes. I don't run from it anymore. I just let it exist. Life didn't magically rebuild itself. It came back in small, deliberate steps. The morning coffee ritual, the sound of rain, the smell of paper and ink. I still write, but not because I'm broken, because I need to remember how it feels to be whole. Every entry I write now isn't about loss. It's about the space that loss leaves behind, and how something new quietly begins to grow there. I found her last letter again a few weeks ago. I'd tucked it inside one of my journals, maybe hoping to forget it. The paper had yellowed at the edges, the ink faded slightly, but her handwriting was still strong. Reading it didn't hurt the way it used to. This time, I saw it for what it really was. Not an apology, not a confession, but a farewell written in her own language. A woman trying to explain the unexplainable. Maybe that was always her gift. She could turn pain into poetry, even if the poetry destroyed us. Sometimes, late at night, I imagine her sitting somewhere far away, maybe by the ocean, still writing. Maybe her new stories aren't about him or me anymore. Maybe she's finally writing about herself. Not who she pretended to be, but who she finally became after all the silence. The thought doesn't hurt. In a strange way, I hope it's true. Mark moved away. I heard through a mutual friend that he left the city, took a job somewhere up north. I never saw him again. I don't think I ever will. There's no anger left, just distance, the kind that time builds when two people stop looking backward. I used to think I'd confront him one last time, make him understand what he took from me. But the truth is, he didn't take her. She left. And that realization changed everything. One evening, I decided to go through our old photographs. I hadn't looked at them in over a year. There were hundreds, trips, birthdays, quiet mornings, messy smiles. I expected the sadness to return, but it didn't. The memories didn't feel fake anymore. They felt like what they were. Real moments that existed, even if they couldn't last. People change, love fades, but the truth of what once was doesn't disappear. It just becomes a story you tell yourself differently over time. I kept one photo. The one from our wedding day. She's looking away from the camera, laughing at something someone said. There's sunlight on her face. In that moment, she looks like the person I fell in love with, before the journals, before the silence, before everything fell apart. I put her in a drawer, not because I need to see it, but because it deserves to exist somewhere. A reminder of what love once looked like before it changed shape. It's funny. I started writing these entries to make sense of her betrayal, to dissect every detail until it stopped haunting me. But now, the words have become something else, a map of survival. Each sentence a step away from anger, each paragraph a bridge toward understanding. Somewhere along the way, I stopped writing about her and started writing about me. Tonight, I went back to the park again. The same one where I left that page in the hollow tree. I don't know why, maybe to see if it was still there. When I reached the spot, I found the page was gone. Someone must have found it, or maybe the wind carried it away. For a moment, I felt a pang of loss, but then I realized that was exactly what was supposed to happen. Words aren't meant to stay buried. They're meant to travel, to touch someone else, to change them the way pain changed me. I sat under that tree for a while, listening to the leaves. The wind whispered like pages turning. It sounded like forgiveness, not hers, not mine, just life moving on. When I got home, I opened my journal to write what I knew would be my final entry. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because I'd finally said enough. I used to think her journal ruined my life. But maybe it saved it. It forced me to look at everything I'd ignored. The distance, the silence, the version of myself that only existed when someone else was watching. It taught me that love isn't proof of worth, and heartbreak isn't punishment. It's the moment you meet yourself for the first time. I stopped there for a moment, my pen hovering above the page. Then I added one last line. She wrote about him. I wrote about her. But in the end, these words were always about me. About learning that sometimes the story doesn't end when love does. It ends when you finally stop rewriting what already happened. I closed the journal and placed it on the shelf beside the others. The room felt lighter, like something invisible had finally lifted. Outside, the city was alive again. Cars passing, distant laughter, the hum of ordinary life continuing without me needing to chase it. I stood by the window and watched the night sky. The moon hung low, pale and calm. Somewhere out there, she might be doing the same thing, staring at the same sky, thinking her own thoughts, writing her own words. Maybe she wonders if I ever forgave her. Maybe she doesn't. It doesn't matter. Forgiveness isn't for the person who hurt you. It's for the part of yourself that can't keep living inside the pain. I took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and whispered into the quiet, "I forgive you." And for the first time, I meant it. The air felt lighter, the world softer. I turned off the light, letting the dark fill the room, not with sadness, but with peace. The silence that once used to suffocate me now felt like an old friend. That night, I dreamed again. Not of her, not of us, but of blank pages. Endless white pages waiting to be written on. And for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of starting over. When I woke up, I opened a new notebook. The first page was clean, untouched. I stared at it for a moment, then wrote 3 words. "This is mine." And that was enough.